Wraith checked his scanner one more time as his ship drifted past the outer satellites of Haven's Rest. The small moon colony showed up as a cluster of dim lights against the darkness of space. Somewhere down there, his target lived and worked among 300 human colonists who had no idea they were harboring a wanted criminal. The Krell bounty. Hunter had been tracking targets for 15 years across 12 different star systems. His success rate remained perfect. Every contract completed, every criminal delivered, every credit earned through skill and precision. This job would be no different, even if it meant traveling to the edge of civilized space to collect. He brought up the file again, though he had already memorized every detail. Daniel Reed, human male, 34 standard years old, former military medic turned colonist, wanted by the Consortium Trade Guild for theft of classified xenotechnology, valued at millions of credits. The bounty offered enough money to let Wraith retire to one of the pleasure worlds near the galactic core. Humans were still relatively new to the greater galaxy. Their planet Earth had joined the Galactic Council only 40 years ago, and most species still knew very little about them. The official files classified humans as a Class 3 sentient species from a mid-tier gravity world. Nothing particularly impressive. They had no natural weapons, no enhanced senses, no remarkable physical abilities that made them stand out among the thousands of species that traveled between the stars. Wraith had captured members of over 60 different species during his career. Humans would be number 61. His ship landed at the colony's small spaceport without drawing attention. Haven's Rest existed primarily as a mining operation, pulling rare minerals from deep beneath the moon's frozen surface. Ships came and went regularly, bringing supplies and taking away cargo. One more vessel meant nothing to the tired workers who barely glanced at the landing pad. Wraith activated his adaptive camouflage as he left his ship. The technology bent light around his body, making him nearly invisible to most forms of detection. He moved through the colony's tunnels like a ghost, studying the layout and searching for his target. The colony itself was unremarkable. Prefabricated buildings connected by enclosed walkways to protect against the moon's thin atmosphere. A central hub contained the administrative offices, a small marketplace, and the basic services needed to keep 300 people alive on a barren rock floating in space. The miners worked in shifts, their lives governed by the rhythms of extraction quotas and equipment maintenance schedules. Wraith found his target in the medical clinic, a modest facility with 6 beds and basic equipment. Daniel Reed wore simple clothes and moved between patients with calm efficiency. An older miner sat on one bed, wincing as Daniel examined a badly bruised arm. 2 other workers waited their turn, chatting quietly about production numbers and upcoming leave time. The bounty hunter watched from outside the clinic's main window, his camouflage keeping him hidden. Daniel cleaned the miner's injury and applied a regenerative gel, explaining in simple terms how to care for the wound. His manner was gentle, professional, unhurried. Nothing about him suggested a criminal who had stolen valuable technology and fled across half the galaxy. But files sometimes lied. Appearances often deceived. Wraith had learned long ago not to trust what targets showed the world. The quiet ones could be the most dangerous. He spent 2 full days observing Daniel's routine. The human lived alone in a small apartment near the clinic. He worked regular shifts, treating the various injuries and illnesses that came with life in a mining colony. He ate meals in the common dining area, usually sitting with the same group of miners who seemed to consider him a friend. He exercised in the colony's small gym during off hours, following a disciplined routine that spoke of military training. Nothing unusual. Nothing that suggested awareness of being hunted, except for small things that Wraith began to notice. The way Daniel always sat with his back to a wall and a clear view of the entrances, how his eyes constantly tracked movement around him, cataloging faces and positions without seeming to, the subtle tension in his posture that never quite relaxed. Even when he smiled at a joke or listened to a colonist's complaints about equipment failures, these were not the behaviors of a simple medical worker living peacefully on a frontier colony. These were the habits of someone who expected trouble and remained ready for it. Wraith decided to move during the colony's night cycle when most workers slept. He entered the medical clinic through a maintenance access point, his scanner confirming Daniel was inside and alone. The human sat at a desk in the small office, reading reports on a datapad. The bounty hunter deactivated his camouflage and raised his plasma pistol in one smooth motion. Daniel Reed, you are wanted by the Consortium Trade Guild. I am authorized to bring you in by any means necessary. Do not resist. Daniel looked up from his datapad without surprise or fear. He set the device down carefully and leaned back in his chair, studying Wraith with eyes that seemed far too calm for someone staring at a weapon. Took you long enough, Daniel said quietly. His voice carried no trace of panic or confusion. I've been waiting 3 weeks. Wraith felt his confidence waver for the first time in his career. Targets didn't wait for bounty hunters. They didn't speak with that particular tone of resignation mixed with something else, something that felt almost like anticipation. You knew I was coming? Wraith kept his weapon steady, but his mind raced through possibilities. Someone was coming, Daniel replied. The guild doesn't leave loose ends. I just wondered if they'd send a professional or an amateur. He studied Wraith's equipment and stance. Professional, I see. That's good. It means you might actually listen before you make the biggest mistake of your life. The words hung in the air between them. Outside the clinic, Haven's Rest continued its quiet night cycle, unaware that everything was about to change. Wraith tightened his grip on his weapon. Start talking. Daniel remained seated with his hands visible on the desk, making no moves that might provoke the armed bounty hunter aiming at his chest. Wraith had expected fear, pleading, perhaps a desperate attempt to flee. Instead, the human appeared almost relieved that someone had finally arrived. The Consortium Trade Guild told you I stole xenotechnology, Daniel said. It was not a question. They probably gave you detailed files about classified research data, prototype designs, things worth millions of credits. Am I right? Wraith nodded slightly, keeping his weapon trained on target. The evidence is clear. You accessed secure systems during a diplomatic mission to the outer colonies. You downloaded restricted files and disappeared. The guild wants you brought in to face justice. Justice. Daniel spoke the word like it tasted bitter. Is that what they called it? He reached slowly for his datapad, moving with deliberate care. I'm going to show you something. If you shoot me, you'll never know the truth. If you wait 30 seconds, you might understand why I stayed here instead of running. Every instinct Wraith had developed over 15 years of hunting told him this was wrong. Targets didn't act this way. They didn't speak with this kind of certainty. But curiosity was also a tool in his profession, and sometimes letting a target talk revealed useful information. 30 seconds, Wraith agreed. Keep your hands where I can see them. Daniel tapped commands into his datapad, then turned the screen toward the bounty hunter. These are the files I stole. Look at them. Really look. Wraith's scanner automatically began processing the data, displaying it on his helmet's internal screen. What he saw made his blood run cold. Medical records. Hundreds of them. All humans. All taken from frontier colonies exactly like Haven's Rest over the past 5 years. The files documented experiments, tissue samples, forced pharmaceutical trials. Some subjects had died during testing. Others showed permanent physical damage. A few had simply disappeared from the records with no explanation given for their fate. The guild has been abducting humans from remote settlements, Daniel explained, his voice steady despite the horror he described. Human physiology is valuable because Earth is what galactic biologists call a high-stress world. Our evolution created unusual resistance to disease, adaptability to different environments, regenerative capabilities that most species lack. We're not special, but we're different enough to be useful for illegal medical research. Wraith scrolled through file after file, shipping manifests that listed humans as cargo, communications between guild officials discussing profit margins and acceptable loss rates, financial records showing millions of credits flowing from pharmaceutical companies to guild accounts. This could be fabricated, Wraith said, but his voice lacked conviction. The data matched every pattern he knew for legitimate intelligence. File timestamps, encryption signatures, communication protocols, all the small details that were almost impossible to fake convincingly. It could be, Daniel agreed. But it's not. I was a special operations medic before I retired to frontier work. I treated victims who escaped from guild facilities. I saw what they did to those people. I listened to their testimony. I held the hand of a 19-year-old girl while she died from complications caused by experimental drugs she never consented to receive. The human's calm facade cracked slightly, showing pain beneath. So I volunteered for a diplomatic mission, got myself assigned to a guild facility and copied everything I could find. Then I came here to Haven's Rest and started preparing these files for transmission to the Galactic Council. I've been waiting for someone like you to show up, because I knew the guild would send hunters instead of law enforcement. They always do when they want problems to disappear quietly. Wraith lowered his weapon slightly, his mind struggling to process the implications. If this was true, if even half of it was accurate, then he had been used as a tool for covering up crimes that violated every Galactic Council law regarding sentient rights. Why Haven's Rest? He asked. Why not transmit the files and disappear? Because Haven's Rest is next on their target list, Daniel replied. The guild has been slowly working their way through colonies in this sector. This settlement is isolated, undermanned, and contains 300 potential subjects. I couldn't just run and let these people get taken. So I stayed. I warned the colony administrator, prepared defenses, and waited to see what would happen first. A guild raid or a bounty hunter? Wraith checked the timeline in the files. The pattern was clear once he knew to look for it. Colonies reported missing persons. Guild ships visited those same areas. Months later, medical records appeared in the database showing human subjects with origin points matching the disappeared colonists. You could have gone to the Galactic Council directly, Wraith said. Why this complicated approach? Because the guild has people inside the council, Daniel answered. I needed the evidence to be public, undeniable, released in a way that couldn't be suppressed or buried in bureaucracy. Having a bounty hunter show up actually helps. You're an independent contractor. You have no loyalty to the guild beyond this one job. If I can convince you, if you can verify what I'm telling you, then you become a witness they can't easily eliminate. Before Wraith could respond, an alarm began blaring throughout the colony. Red emergency lights flashed in the corridors outside the clinic. His ship's automated security system sent an urgent message to his helmet display. Multiple vessels approaching Haven's Rest. Military-grade weapons detected. Signatures matched guild security forces. Daniel stood up slowly, his expression grim but unsurprised. That's not a rescue party coming for you. The guild doesn't pay bounty hunters to collect criminals and then send backup. They send cleanup crews to eliminate witnesses and destroy evidence. Wraith pulled up the sensor data from his ship. 5 guild security vessels, each armed well beyond what was legal for private security forces. They were not approaching with hailing signals or identification protocols. They were approaching in attack formation. They're going to kill everyone in this colony, Daniel said quietly. Every miner, every administrator, every person who might have seen something or heard something. They'll claim it was an accident, maybe a reactor failure or a mining explosion. By the time investigators arrive, there will be nothing left but debris. Wraith looked at the human standing calmly in front of him, despite the approaching death that neither of them could outrun. You knew this might happen. I hoped it wouldn't, Daniel replied. But I prepared for it anyway. He walked to a storage locker and pulled out equipment that no simple medical worker should possess. Body armor, weapons, military-grade communication devices. So here's your choice, bounty hunter. You can try to leave with me as your prisoner, and probably get shot down as a loose end. You can try to leave alone and definitely get shot down as a witness. Or you can help me defend this colony long enough for the evidence to get transmitted to someone who might actually care about justice. The guild ships were 3 minutes from weapons range. Wraith had hunted criminals across the galaxy for 15 years, priding himself on his perfect record and professional detachment. He had never questioned a contract before. He had never doubted that the people who paid him were righteous and the targets he hunted were guilty. He had never been forced to choose between his reputation and doing what was right. Daniel held out a spare weapon. I won't force you. But if you're staying, I could use someone who knows how to fight. Wraith took the weapon. I'm going to want a very large refund on this contract. If we survive, I'll write you a reference letter, Daniel replied, and despite everything, he smiled. Then the first plasma blast hit the colony's shield generator, and there was no more time for talking. The shield generator exploded in a shower of sparks and twisted metal, sending the lights throughout Haven's Rest flickering. Emergency systems kicked in immediately, bathing the corridors in dim red illumination that cast strange shadows across every surface. Somewhere in the distance, people started screaming. Daniel moved before Wraith could process what was happening. The human grabbed a communication headset and began issuing orders with the calm authority of someone who had done this many times before. All personnel to emergency shelter points. This is not a drill. Medical staff, Prepare triage stations in the reinforced sections. Security, arm yourselves and report to defensive positions. Wraith followed Daniel into the corridor, his bounty hunter instincts warring with the completely new situation he found himself in. Through the colony's windows, he could see the guild ships descending, their weapon ports glowing with building energy. These were not precision tools meant for capturing criminals. These were instruments of destruction designed to leave no survivors. How many security personnel does this colony have? Wraith asked, checking the charge on his weapon. 12, Daniel replied, leading them toward the central hub at a dead run. Most of them are retired military like me. The colony administrator thought I was paranoid when I convinced him to stockpile weapons and run defense drills. He doesn't think that anymore. They reached the hub to find chaos barely held in check by the colony administrator, a middle-aged human woman named Patricia, who was directing colonists toward the reinforced shelters with impressive efficiency. She saw Daniel and immediately moved to him. They're targeting the main entrance and the cargo bay, she reported, trying to get troops inside. We've sealed the emergency bulkheads, but they won't hold long against military cutting tools. Get everyone into the deep shelters, Daniel ordered. Keep them calm, keep them quiet. Wraith, you're with me and the security team. We need to slow them down long enough for the colonists to get to safety. Wraith had 100 questions, but training took over. In combat, you moved first and asked questions later. He followed Daniel and 4 armed colonists toward the main entrance, where plasma fire was already eating through the reinforced door. The human security personnel looked terrified but determined. These were not soldiers. They were miners and technicians who had learned to shoot because their friend the medic had insisted it might save their lives someday. That day had arrived, and they were facing professional killers with vastly superior equipment. Daniel positioned them with quick efficiency, using the colony's architecture to create defensive positions that would force the attackers into kill zones. Wraith found himself grudgingly impressed. The human had turned a simple entrance corridor into a tactical nightmare for anyone trying to push through. They'll breach in 30 seconds, Daniel said, his voice steady. Wait for my signal. Aim for center mass. Fire in controlled bursts. Don't waste ammunition trying to be heroes. Wraith checked his scanner. 20 guild security troops were stacked up outside the entrance, equipped with military-grade armor and weapons, against 5 defenders with civilian equipment and 1 bounty hunter with standard gear. The odds were not encouraging. The entrance door exploded inward with a deafening roar. Guild soldiers poured through the gap, their weapons already tracking for targets. Daniel's signal was a single word. Now, the defenders opened fire from their covered positions. The first 3 guild soldiers went down immediately, caught by surprise in the narrow corridor. The others dove for cover, returning fire that chewed through walls and sent debris flying in every direction. Wraith fought like he had been trained, picking targets and eliminating them with precision shots. But he could not help noticing Daniel. The human moved through the combat with frightening efficiency. His shots perfectly placed, his movements economical and controlled. This was not a retired medic fighting for his life. This was an experienced soldier doing what he had been trained to do. A guild soldier broke from cover and charged their position. Daniel shot him twice, then immediately shifted to another target without hesitation or wasted motion. One of the colonist defenders took a plasma bolt to the shoulder and went down screaming. Daniel dragged him to cover with one hand while continuing to fire with the other, never breaking his defensive rhythm. The guild forces retreated temporarily, leaving 8 of their number dead or wounded in the corridor. Wraith used the brief pause to reload and reassess. The colonist with the shoulder wound was being treated by another defender, who had basic medical training. The others looked shaken but functional. They're going to try the cargo bay next, Daniel said, checking his ammunition. Patricia, status on evacuation? The administrator's voice came through the communication system. 70% in shelters. Need another 5 minutes? We might not have 5 minutes, Daniel replied. He looked at Wraith. I need you to do something that's probably going to make you angry. Before Wraith could ask what, an explosion rocked the entire colony. The cargo bay, just as Daniel had predicted. Alarms began screaming about hull breaches and pressure losses in multiple sections. They're not trying to capture the colony anymore, Wraith realized. They're going to destroy it, which means they think everyone here is already contaminated by knowledge they can't allow to spread, Daniel said. We need to split up. I'll take 3 defenders and hold the cargo bay. You take the other one and get to the communication center. There's a data packet queued and ready to transmit. It contains everything. Sent to 30 different news organizations, council representatives, and human military commands. The Guild has been jamming our signals, but your ship has military-grade communication equipment. If you can get to it and boost our signal, we can get the truth out. Wraith understood immediately. You're buying time for me to destroy everything the Guild has been trying to hide. I'm buying time for justice, Daniel corrected. Your choice whether you help or not. Through the damaged sections of the colony, Wraith could see more Guild ships landing, reinforcements. They were bringing enough force to level the entire settlement and everyone in it. If he ran to his ship now, he might be able to escape. His reputation would be ruined, but he would be alive. Or he could help a human he had been sent to capture. Destroy his relationship with one of the galaxy's most powerful trade organizations, and possibly get himself killed in the process. Wraith grabbed the remaining defender, a young man barely out of his teens who looked absolutely terrified. Show me to the communication center, fast. Daniel smiled briefly. I take back what I said before. You're not going to get a reference letter. You're going to get a medal. I'd rather get paid, Wraith muttered, but he was already moving. Behind them, Daniel and 3 colonists ran toward the cargo bay, and the Guild soldiers pouring through the breach. Ahead, the communication center waited with the evidence that could bring down an empire, or die unheard in the void. Wraith had spent 15 years hunting criminals for money. Today, for the first time, he was hunting for something more important. He just hoped he survived long enough to appreciate the irony. The communication center sat in the deepest part of the colony, designed to survive even catastrophic damage to the surface structures. Wraith and the young colonist, who had identified himself as Peter, ran through corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting while the sounds of combat echoed from multiple directions. How long have you known about Daniel's background? Wraith asked as they ran, his scanner tracking for hostile movement ahead. Everyone knew he was more than a medic, Peter replied, breathing hard. You don't move like that, don't carry yourself like that, unless you've seen serious combat. We just didn't ask questions. Out here on the frontier, people come to forget their past. We respect that. They reached the communication center to find 2 Guild soldiers already trying to breach the door. Wraith didn't hesitate. His first shot took one soldier in the back before they realized they were not alone. The second soldier turned with impressive speed. But Peter surprised everyone by firing his weapon with reasonable accuracy, forcing the attacker into cover. Wraith finished the fight with 2 precise shots, then immediately began working on the door's access panel. Get behind me and watch our backs. More will come. Inside the communication center, banks of equipment hummed with power. A single terminal displayed a ready transmission. Gigabytes of data compressed and encrypted, addressed to dozens of recipients across the galaxy. Below it, a message in simple text. Signal blocked by jamming. Need boost to punch through. Wraith connected his personal communication device to the system, routing the signal through his ship's more powerful transmitter. The Guild jamming field was military-grade, designed to prevent any signals from leaving the colony. But his ship had been built for bounty hunting in hostile territory. Its systems were designed to punch through exactly this kind of interference. Come on, he muttered, watching the connection status climb slowly. Come on. Behind him, Peter called out a warning. Movement in the corridor. Multiple hostiles. Wraith grabbed his weapon and moved to the door, using his scanner to count targets. 6 Guild soldiers approaching in tactical formation. Against 1 bounty hunter and 1 terrified colonist, the outcome should have been certain. Should have been. Wraith had not survived 15 years by fighting fair. He triggered his ship's remote systems, activating the automated defense protocols. In the landing bay, his vessel's weapon systems came online and began firing at Guild troops who had been trying to breach its hull. The sudden attack from an unexpected direction threw the enemy assault into chaos. Then Wraith triggered the second protocol, one he had installed years ago for exactly this kind of situation. His ship began broadcasting a false distress signal on Guild military frequencies, claiming to be under attack by pirates and requesting immediate assistance. The message was complete nonsense, but it would confuse enemy communications and possibly make them wonder if their operation had been compromised. The 6 soldiers in the corridor hesitated, clearly receiving conflicting orders through their communication system. Wraith used that moment of confusion to lean around the doorframe and eliminate two of them with carefully aimed shots. Peter, gaining confidence, managed to wound a third. The remaining soldiers retreated to regroup, giving Wraith precious seconds. He checked the transmission status. 70% complete. The data was punching through the jamming field, spreading across the galaxy faster than the guild could possibly stop it. "Daniel, how are you holding?" Wraith called through the communication system. Static answered him for several seconds, then Daniel's voice came through, strained but alive. "We're holding, but barely. They've got heavy weapons, and they're not worried about damaging the colony anymore. How's the transmission?" 85%, Wraith replied. "We need 2 more minutes." "You might not have 2 minutes," a new voice interrupted. "Cold professional carrying absolute authority. This is Commander Bryant of Guild Security. Whoever you are, you've made a terrible mistake. Surrender now and I'll make your death quick." Wraith didn't bother responding. He had heard that particular speech before, usually from people who were about to lose very badly. Instead, he focused on protecting the communications center, while the transmission climbed toward completion. More guild soldiers appeared, trying to rush their position through sheer numbers. Wraith and Peter fought them back with increasingly desperate defense. The young colonist had stopped shaking and was now firing with grim determination, apparently deciding that if he was going to die, he would at least die fighting. Wraith found himself respecting that attitude. Humans had a strange ability to find courage when everything seemed hopeless. 95%. The transmission was almost complete. Just a few more seconds. Then the wall beside them exploded and guild soldiers poured through the new breach. Wraith managed to shoot 3 before something hit him hard in the side, spinning him around and sending his weapon flying. His armor had absorbed most of the impact, but pain flared through his ribs where the plasma bolt had struck. Peter went down next, a shot to the leg that made him scream and collapse. Guild soldiers advanced into the communication center, weapons raised for the killing shots. The transmission counter hit 100% and flashed green. At that exact moment, the entire colony shook with a different kind of explosion, not plasma weapons or demolition charges, ship engines, big ones, military ones. Through the breached wall, Wraith could see new vessels descending from orbit, sleek warships painted in the distinctive colors of human defense forces. At least a dozen of them, with more appearing every second. Their weapon systems already locked on the guild security ships. All hostile forces. "This is Colonel Stevens of the Human Third Fleet." A voice boomed through every communication channel, impossible to ignore or block. "You are engaging in hostile action against human civilians in violation of Galactic Council law. Stand down immediately or be destroyed." The guild soldiers in the communication center froze, uncertainty replacing their previous confidence. Their commander's voice crackled through their headsets, but Wraith couldn't hear the words. Whatever was being said, it didn't sound like confident victory. Then Daniel's voice came through the colony-wide system, and Wraith could hear the satisfaction in it despite the obvious pain and exhaustion. "Colonel Stevens, good to hear from you. Ghost Team 7 requesting immediate assistance. We have multiple wounded and hostile forces still active in the colony. Ghost Team 7. Wraith had heard that designation before, whispered in intelligence briefings and classified reports. Human Special Operations. The kind of soldiers who operated behind enemy lines and completed impossible missions. The kind who never really retired, just pretended to until they were needed again. The guild commander made his choice. "All forces retreat to ships. We're leaving." But the human fleet had other plans. As guild security vessels tried to lift off, human warships opened fire with precision that spoke of serious combat experience. Not killing shots, but disabling ones. Engines destroyed, weapon systems offline, ships forced to land or drift helplessly in space. Within minutes, the battle was over. Guild forces surrendered or died trying to escape. Human Marines began landing, securing the colony and treating the wounded with efficient professionalism. Wraith sat against the wall of the communication center, holding his injured side and watching Peter receive medical attention from a human combat medic who worked with the same calm competence that Daniel had shown. The young colonist would survive, though he would have an impressive scar to show for his courage. Daniel appeared in the doorway, supported by 2 Marines and bleeding from multiple wounds. He looked at Wraith and smiled. "Still think you chose the wrong human?" "I think I chose correctly," Wraith replied. "I just didn't know it at the time." Daniel nodded to one of the Marines who helped Wraith to his feet. Come on, bounty hunter. We both need medical attention, and then we need to talk about what happens next. What happens next? Wraith asked. Next, we testify at the biggest trial the Galactic Council has seen in 50 years, Daniel said. The transmission went to 30 different news organizations. By now, everyone in the galaxy knows what the Guild has been doing. They can't hide it, can't spin it, can't make it disappear. You and I are the witnesses who survived to tell the story. Wraith considered that as Marines led them both toward the medical bay. His career as a bounty hunter was over. His reputation was destroyed. Every criminal organization he had ever crossed would probably want him dead. His comfortable, profitable life had ended the moment he chose to help a human instead of completing his contract. And somehow, watching Guild officers being arrested and colonists being reunited with loved ones they thought were lost, Wraith found he didn't mind nearly as much as he expected. Perhaps choosing the wrong human had actually meant choosing the right side for once. The medical bay on the human warship was considerably better equipped than Haven's rest clinic. Wraith sat on a bed while a human doctor finished treating the burns along his side, applying regenerative gel that dulled the pain to a distant ache. 3 beds away, Daniel was receiving similar treatment for multiple injuries, including a nasty plasma wound to his shoulder that the doctor said had missed major arteries by less than a centimeter. You're lucky to be alive, the doctor told Daniel while wrapping his shoulder in smart bandages that would monitor healing and dispense medication as needed. All of you are. When we got the distress call, we thought we'd be recovering bodies, not survivors. We had help, Daniel replied, nodding toward Wraith. A bounty hunter decided to switch sides at a very convenient moment. The doctor glanced at Wraith with curiosity, but said nothing. In the 3 days since the battle, Wraith had been treated with cautious respect by the human military personnel. They knew he had been sent to capture Daniel. They also knew he had chosen to fight alongside the colonists instead. That complicated decision seemed to confuse them almost as much as it confused Wraith himself. Colonel Stevens entered the medical bay, accompanied by 2 officers who carried themselves with the controlled readiness of people trained to kill efficiently. The colonel was a tall woman with gray hair and eyes that had seen too much combat to be impressed by much of anything. Mr. Reed, Mr. Wraith, she greeted them formally. I'm told you're both recovered enough for conversation. We need to discuss what happens when we reach the council station. Trial preparations, Daniel said. It wasn't a question. The largest trial in Galactic Council history, Stevens confirmed. The evidence you transmitted has created a political catastrophe. 3 council representatives have already resigned. 2 major corporations have seen their stock values collapse. The Guild's assets have been frozen pending investigation, and over 200 victims have been identified and are being recovered from various Guild facilities across the frontier. She pulled up a holographic display showing news reports from across the galaxy. Every major network was covering the story. Images of rescued humans, testimony from survivors, leaked internal Guild communications discussing profit margins from illegal experimentation. The scandal was too large to hide or contain. Public opinion is demanding justice, E. Stevens continued. The human government is leading the call for prosecution, but we're not alone. 4 other species have discovered their citizens were also targeted by the Guild. The political pressure is enormous. Wraith listened to all of this while feeling increasingly uncomfortable. He had spent 15 years existing in the shadows of galactic society, taking contracts and avoiding politics. Now he was apparently at the center of the biggest political crisis in recent history. What do you need from us? He asked. Testimony, one of Stevens' officers replied. Both of you witnessed the attempted cover-up firsthand. Mr. Wraith, your decision to help defend the colony and transmit the evidence despite being contracted by the Guild demonstrates that even their own hired personnel found their actions indefensible once they understood the truth. I didn't do it for politics, Wraith said. I did it because mass murder is bad for business. Daniel smiled slightly. You did it because it was the right thing to do. You can admit that without losing your tough bounty hunter reputation. I have no reputation left to lose, Wraith pointed out. Every criminal organization in the galaxy now knows I betrayed a contract. I'm unemployable in my own profession. Which brings us to an interesting opportunity, Stevens said. She dismissed the holographic display and looked directly at Wraith. Human intelligence has been tracking trafficking operations across the frontier for years. We've rescued victims when we found them, but we've always been one step behind the networks. We need people who understand how criminal organizations operate, who know the systems and protocols, who can think like bounty hunters and smugglers. Wraith understood where this was going. You want me to work for you? We want you to work with us, Stevens corrected. Daniel has agreed to lead a joint task force focused on dismantling trafficking networks. He's recommended you as someone who might be interested in continuing this fight. You barely know me, Wraith said to Daniel. We fought together for less than an hour. I know you made the hard choice when it mattered, Daniel replied. I know you could have run but chose to stay. I know you risked your life to get that transmission through. That tells me more about your character than 15 years of contract history. Wraith considered the offer. Working for a government meant regulations, oversight, people questioning his methods. It meant trading the independence of bounty hunting for the restrictions of official employment. It meant choosing justice over profit, ethics over expedience. It also meant having support, resources, and the authority to go after targets that were too dangerous or too well protected for individual hunters. It meant fighting on the right side instead of hoping the people who paid him were righteous. What about the trial? Wraith asked. The guild will have excellent lawyers. They'll try to discredit both of us. Let them try, Stephen said. We have evidence from their own systems, testimony from hundreds of victims, financial records proving conspiracy across multiple organizations. Your testimony adds context and demonstrates the cover-up attempt, but the case doesn't depend entirely on your credibility. One of the officers handed Wraith a data pad. This is a preliminary contract. No obligation to sign now. Read it, think about it, decide after the trial. But understand that what you did at Haven's Rest has already made you a target. The guild's leadership might be facing prosecution, but the criminal networks they worked with will want revenge. You're going to need protection and resources whether you work with us or not. That was an uncomfortable truth Wraith had been trying not to think about. He had painted a target on his back the moment he chose to help Daniel. Going back to his old life was no longer an option, even if he wanted to. I'll read the contract, he said finally. Stevens nodded. That's all we ask. In the meantime, we'll be arriving at the council station in 6 hours. You'll both be given secure accommodations and full security. The trial begins in 3 days. Media from across the galaxy will be watching. This is important not just for justice, but for sending a message that no organization is too powerful to face consequences for crimes against sentient beings. After the colonel and her officers left, Daniel and Wraith sat in silence for several minutes. Finally, Daniel spoke. You could still run. Take a fast ship to the outer territories, disappear into the frontier. Start over somewhere no one knows your name or your history. Is that what you would do? Wraith asked. No, Daniel admitted. But I'm human. We have a reputation for being stubborn and foolish about things like justice and revenge. Maybe some of that stubbornness is contagious, Wraith said. I spent 15 years hunting people for money. I was good at it. But I never thought about whether I was making the galaxy better or just serving whoever paid the most. Now I know the difference. That knowledge changes things. Daniel stood carefully, favoring his injured shoulder. The trial is going to be difficult. They'll question everything about your past, every contract you took, every person you captured. They'll try to make you look like a criminal defending criminals. I've been called worse, Wraith replied, and I'll have the truth on my side. That has to count for something. In a fair trial, it counts for everything, Daniel said. Let's hope the council remembers what fair actually means. Through the ship's windows, Wraith could see the massive council station growing larger as they approached. Thousands of ships from hundreds of species, all gathering to witness justice being delivered or denied. The biggest trial in galactic history, and somehow he was going to be at the center of it. 3 days ago, he had been a bounty hunter with a perfect record and a comfortable life. Now he was a witness in a political catastrophe, unemployable in his old profession and possibly working for human intelligence. He should have felt worse about it. The fact that he actually felt hopeful about the future told him everything he needed to know about the choice he had made. Sometimes choosing the wrong human turned out to be choosing exactly the right path forward. 6 months after the trial that reshaped galactic politics, Wraith stood on the bridge of a modified transport ship, watching a suspected trafficking hub through enhanced scanning equipment. Beside him, Daniel reviewed tactical information on a holographic display while 3 other team members prepared equipment in the cargo bay below. The trial had lasted 2 months. Testimony from hundreds of victims, analysis of thousands of documents, expert witnesses explaining the medical experiments and their violations of sentient rights. The Guild's lawyers had tried everything to create doubt, attacking credibility and arguing technicalities. In the end, the evidence had been overwhelming. 15 Guild executives received life sentences. 43 other individuals across multiple organizations faced prosecution. The Consortium Trade Guild itself was dissolved, its assets distributed to victims as compensation. Wraith's testimony had been particularly effective because he had no reason to lie. He was not a victim seeking justice or a human defending his species. He was a professional bounty hunter who had been used as a tool for covering up crimes, and his cold analysis of the cover-up attempt had carried weight with the council judges. The human government had offered him asylum and citizenship. Daniel had offered him a position on the new joint task force targeting trafficking operations. Wraith had accepted both, mainly because the alternative was spending the rest of his life looking over his shoulder while various criminal organizations tried to kill him for betraying a contract. "We've got confirmation," one of the team members called, up from the cargo bay. Thermal signatures matched the patterns. At least 30 people being held in the sublevels, most likely sedated for transport. Daniel studied the scans. "Guards? 20 visible, probably more hidden," Wraith replied, his scanner picking up weapon signatures and movement patterns. "Professional security, not civilians. They're expecting trouble." "They should be," Daniel said. "We've shut down 4 of their operations in the last 3 months. They know someone is hunting them." The task force had been remarkably successful. Combining human military intelligence with Wraith's knowledge of how criminal networks operated had created an effective team that understood both sides of the hunter-prey relationship. They had rescued over 100 victims so far, arrested dozens of traffickers, and dismantled supply chains that had existed for years. The work was dangerous, often thankless, and paid considerably less than bounty hunting. Wraith found himself enjoying it more than he had expected. "Approach vector locked," their pilot called out. "Landing in 2 minutes. Try not to get shot this time." "No promises," Daniel replied. He looked at Wraith. "Standard plan. You take the main entrance with Alpha Team, I'll take Beta Team through the maintenance access." Wraith confirmed. "We secure the prisoners first, then worry about arrests." They had learned that lesson the hard way during their second operation, when prisoners had been used as hostages during a standoff. Now they prioritized getting victims to safety before engaging with defenders. It complicated tactical planning but saved lives. The ship landed on a deserted platform 300 meters from the target facility. Both teams deployed quickly, moving through the shadows of what had once been a legitimate shipping facility before criminals had repurposed it for darker business. Wraith led Beta Team through a maintenance tunnel that his scanner had identified as the weakest entry point. 2 of his team members were human marines. The third was a Quellan engineer, whose species had also been targeted by trafficking networks. They worked together with practiced efficiency, trusting each other's abilities and watching each other's backs. The facility's security was good, but not good enough. Wraith's scanner detected electronic locks before they became problems, and the Quellan engineer disabled them without triggering alarms. They reached the sublevel holding cells without encountering guards. Inside the cells, victims from 4 different species lay in medically induced unconsciousness, prepared for transport to buyers Wraith preferred not to think about. His team began carefully moving them toward the exit while monitoring for security response. From above, the sound of weapons fire indicated that Daniel's team had made contact with guards at the main entrance. The diversion was working exactly as planned, pulling security away from the prisoners. "Beta Team, we have all 32 prisoners," Wraith reported through his communication device, moving to extraction point. "Alpha Team is encountering heavier resistance than expected." Daniel's voice came back, strained. "They've got reinforcements we didn't know about. We're holding but could use support." Wraith made the decision immediately. "Team, get the prisoners to the ship. I'm going to help Alpha Team." His human team members didn't argue. They understood the calculus. Saving prisoners was the priority, but leaving teammates to die was unacceptable. Wraith moved through the facility toward the sounds of combat with the efficiency of someone who had spent years hunting dangerous targets. He knew how to move quietly, how to use cover, how to appear where enemies didn't expect. Those skills served him well as he approached the main entrance from behind the security forces. The fight was not going well for Daniel's team. They were pinned down by superior numbers and firepower, unable to advance or retreat. Wraith counted at least 15 hostiles, all equipped with military-grade weapons and armor. He opened fire from his unexpected angle, taking down 3 guards before they realized they were being flanked. Daniel's team immediately seized the opportunity, pressing their advantage while the enemy was confused. The battle lasted less than 3 minutes. When the weapons fire stopped, 12 guards lay dead or wounded, the others had surrendered, and Alpha Team had sustained only minor injuries. Daniel nodded to Wraith as Marines began securing prisoners. "Good timing." "You would have done the same," Wraith replied. They had both learned that lesson over the past 6 months. This was not like bounty hunting, where success meant bringing in targets alone and taking full credit. This was teamwork where victory came from trusting others and being trusted in return. The rescued victims were loaded onto the ship and taken to a medical facility where they would receive treatment and help reuniting with their families. The captured traffickers were handed over to council enforcement for prosecution. The facility was tagged for detailed investigation. As their ship lifted away from the operations site, Wraith stood at a viewing port and watched the criminal facility shrink into the distance. Somewhere out there, 17 more operations had been identified by their intelligence network. 17 more chances to stop the kind of suffering he had seen at Haven's Rest. Daniel joined him at the viewing port, holding 2 containers of the human beverage called coffee. He handed one to Wraith, who had learned to tolerate the bitter drink over the past months. "Colonel Stevens wants us to take a week of leave before the next operation," Daniel said. "She thinks we're pushing too hard." "She's probably right," Wraith admitted. "But there are people out there who need help now, not next week." "Very human thinking," Daniel observed. "You're picking up bad habits. Or good ones," Wraith replied. "I'm still deciding which." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars. 6 months ago, Wraith would never have imagined this future. Working with humans, fighting for justice instead of profit, actually caring about the people he rescued instead of just viewing them as contracts or complications. "Do you ever regret it?" Daniel asked quietly. "Choosing to help instead of taking me in?" Wraith considered the question honestly. He had lost his reputation, his career, his comfortable existence. He had gained danger, modest pay, and work that exhausted him physically and emotionally. By any objective measure, he should regret everything. "No," he said finally. "That bounty contract was the best thing that ever happened to me. I just didn't know it until I chose to break it." Daniel smiled. "For what it's worth, you were the best thing that happened to that operation. If you hadn't helped transmit that evidence, if you hadn't fought alongside us, Haven's Rest would have been destroyed and the truth would have died with it." "Then I suppose we were both lucky," Wraith said. "You chose the right colony to hide in, and the guild chose the wrong bounty hunter to send after you." "The wrong bounty hunter who became the right partner," Daniel corrected. Their pilot's voice interrupted the moment. "Setting course for headquarters. ETA 6 hours. Everyone get some rest because Stevens is apparently assigning us to training exercises when we get back." Wraith and Daniel both groaned. Human military training exercises were exhausting and seemed specifically designed to push participants beyond reasonable limits. But they also saved lives during real operations, so complaining too much felt ungrateful. As Wraith returned to his quarters for much-needed rest, he passed the medical bay where the rescued victims were being monitored. Through the door he could see a young human woman who had regained consciousness, crying with relief as she realized she was safe. A medic sat beside her, explaining gently what had happened and where she was going. That image stayed with Wraith as he lay down to sleep. In 15 years of bounty hunting, he had never seen that look of relief on anyone's face. He had delivered criminals to justice and collected payment, but he had never actually saved anyone. Now he saved people regular,